Everybody. So roughly about 8 years ago, I was working for a federal agency as part of another consulting outfit, and there was a big project. It was, I don't know if some of you have heard of SCAP. They were trying to basically implement and use SCAP and use XCCDF checks and oval checks and to check over 1 million nodes across an entire agency. And it seemed like a pretty monstrous and pretty badass effort. So I was like, sure, I'll do this. And naturally, like any big organization or enterprise, even though it's government, they gravitated towards the tools, right? Because the tools are going to solve everyone's problem. And so fast forward, and kind of relevant to the topic of this talk is how there's broken threat models out there. And what happened with that federal agency is that they invested a lot of money, a lot of our money, a lot of your money, in trying to solve a risk problem. They wanted to find out what was the extent to which they were vulnerable across all platforms. It didn't matter where they were deployed, if there was in lower environments or production environments or endpoint computing environments. They just threw everything into one big pile and decided to light a match of US dollars and invest in a technology that ultimately never got fully adopted. So as I kind of look out into the lights and I try to, differentiate the suits from the black hats out there, some of you might actually be practitioners within an enterprise, and this sort of story where there's a lot of CapEx and investment might actually resonate. And it happens over and over and over and over again. So I begin with this, and this is really the crux of what I see, having been in the industry for a little bit. And also, I just spent time, I got called in, many of you know that I'm a pinch hitter for today. So I hope to do you all justice, but I was called in on Wednesday to come and do this talk. But I wanted to revisit some of the prior talks. So I looked at, Joe from back then, he was with DHS, and then I looked at Bruce Schneier, and I looked at also, I'm having a memory lapse, Gary McGraw. So all of them had phenomenal things to say. And these are talks that have happened over years in different cities, and it's the same problem. So this talk is really meant to commissioning OWASP members for real change in AppSec. It's the end of the day. It's been a long week. You guys are looking forward to get home. So I'm trying to kind of pump everybody up to take some of the content, some of the talks that you've attended, and actually weaponize it within whether you're a consultant, whether you're a practitioner, but to actually do something for change. I was 10 years ago. I wasn't managing the OWASP chapter. I wasn't founder of a company, and I didn't write anything, maybe a blog or two. But every one of you here that has passion, and for being here, for taking time away from your personal lives and your professional lives, I sense that you have the same passion. I put this thing up here, 2 things can destroy any relationship, and that's unrealistic expectations and poor communication, because security professionals are plagued with having bad communication. And not in the sense of delivery, like in the sense of being able to articulate something clearly, concisely, and make a point. Security professionals, technology professionals for that matter, developers are extremely intelligent and very articulate because they're reading tons of information, and their vocabulary is far better than some of the professionals in other industries. Where we lack in communication is being able to empathize our point of view around securing anything, whether it be securing an application or a platform or a mobile device or a cloud component, being able to articulate the value of that remediation or baking that security effort in. And that's the biggest challenge. We have a big problem. And that leads to false expectations. The security groups within traditional Fortune 500 organizations are not the life of the party in the sense that they're, not that they're not interesting, but in the sense that they're always the bearer of bad news. And so we have a historical problem of rendering security information or risks, that word that is commonly used incorrectly, it's basically just being thrown around. So we've shot ourselves in the foot. So how do we rebound And how do we rebound in an OWASP way? Because, and I've been with the OWASP, and I've run the Atlanta chapter, and I've done talks and been a part of projects, and I love the international organization for a lot of different reasons, because they really are, they always have been looking to make a change, looking to foster change. So this talk begins with looking at a lot of storytelling around true risk dilemmas, problems, threat models that have been broken, threat models that have been attempted to be created within different organizations, startup companies, across multiple different sectors, but have failed to reach some level of effective mitigation. Operationalizing threat modeling is hard. The common problems that people say is that it takes way too much time. Developers sometimes can't wrap their heads around the time suck that it has when they're already constrained to basically fulfill their project deliverables over a short window. So hopefully after this, I can inspire you all to somehow see how this all can be catalyzed. And ironically, with some of the OWASP projects that have been flagship for a while, or that have been even talked about or demoed this week. Well, let's begin with risk. So there's a formula for risk. And the generic one is risk equals threat times vulnerability times impact. And there's usually a probability of threat that goes along as a coefficient for threat. But not a lot of people understand this formula, because when we speak about finding bugs, and the Gary McGraw talk really stood out because he talked about how we're very bug happy. We're like we're parading bugs everywhere we go. We have SAS, we have DAS, we have IaaS, we have RAS, we have all these different alphabet soups finding more bugs. So our messaging to our internal customers, or if you're a consultant and external customers, is, I got more crap for you to fix. So as a result, they hate us even more. So context helps to fix that crap. And one of that is, what is this crap causing me in terms of a pain point? Can you monetize this? Can you actually articulate to me how me as, let's say I'm in retail, obviously the financial impact of credit card handling, or let's say I'm in energy, and uptime of my bulk energy systems is paramount for my customers. How can you speak to me that certain vulnerabilities or bugs that we are all finding in what we do is actually material risk related to the operations? And that's where we still fall short as a community. Now, I somehow cheated. I was, my background, I went to Cornell and I got an international finance degree, and I got a lot of good business background. And a lot of the roles that I had at different enterprises, international banks and whatnot, really allowed me to understand and empathize and articulate security in a way that made them understand why they should listen, not just remediate. Because forget about remediation, let's build in security quicker, faster, better. So that was one of the reasons that inspired me to write this process for attack simulation and threat analysis. It's a risk-centric threat modeling methodology. And for all those that are out there that are thinking, well, this is another agenda, another methodology, you can take this and you can cut it up as much as you like. Build your own, snap it off like Legos, and make something that works. And I think that was the same message that Gary McGraw also had in his keynote. I think it was in Cambridge. But the point is that we need to have a process that makes sense, that can serve as a wrapper for all the different security activities that we do. Pen testing, source code reviews, static analysis, vulnerability scanning, architectural reviews. What about threat monitoring? The one aspect is, we'll talk about this here. If you look at the different stages of PASTA, one of the things that differentiates PASTA as an acronym to what the risk-centric threat model is that it incorporates two really key different things: business impact and threat intel. And if you look at other types of approaches, it's called a threat model for a reason. If you're using other types of, I'll use the word methodologies loosely, and you're not incorporating threats, which could be harvested from your SecOps team, they're eyes on glass, looking at alerts at the application layer, platform layer, network layer. And how are you able to translate those alerts into your threat model? It's a threat model. So where are you getting your threats? If you're getting your threats from a list, I love OWASP, and I just spent, I think, a couple of seconds talking about how I love OWASP, but the OWASP top 10 is not going to cut it for you. It'll be a good guide if you're totally lost and you want to see what the world is doing, and the OWASP top 10, at least from my perspective, is not fully evidence-based, where it taps on the shoulders of a lot of tools out there and say, hey, we've harvested 1 million alerts to say that SQL injection, blind SQL injection, different forms of cross-site scripting and cross-site request forgery. We've mined all this data, and here it is over 12 months. That's definitely a study. And maybe we'll get there. And I've always wanted that we could get there. But the point goes back to the threat. What are you using for your threat basis? Because we want to go back to that formula of how you're solving for R, how you're solving for risk. So there was before this, I actually had another presentation for work-related, and there is a startup company, medical manufacturer device, IoT, and it's great because they're a small company. And I love dealing with smaller companies because it gives me a chance to really, it's a fresh canvas across the board. From threat modeling to security hardening, I mean, you name it, it's a fresh canvas. So being able to articulate the value proposition of why you should build in security earlier is phenomenal. This particular group and company that's California-based, interesting cosmetic technology product that is IoT. And the short of it is this. One of the questions that came up is, how is it that the threats that you've researched for our platform, for our company, is actually going to be of impact? And correlate this to my application. And that's one of my favorite questions, because you want to take the threats that you're harvesting, that you're putting your own stethoscope to the ground and seeing what's out there, and you want to correlate it to your technology footprint, your frameworks, your open libs, your binaries, third-party binaries, third-party software, and correlating threats or vulnerabilities that have been exploited and that have been reported, and correlating that to your model, because that shows precedence. And then you correlate that to threat motives. What do people in healthcare, what do adversarial groups and individuals in healthcare want? They want PHI for identity theft. They want to kill people. It's true. With implantables and wearables, they want to do things for the lulz. So you have to look at what is the precedence of actual breaches, actual incidents for the market that you're in, or the sub-market that you're in order that your messaging for building security in can be more topical. Because once you start to make recommendations, maybe from OWASP standards or ASVS or security knowledge framework, then the things that you're cherry picking from those references, those great projects, can actually be material for risk reduction because you're addressing a real threat. So I wrote this book, and there was already a brief introduction. The only reason I bring this up is simply for context. The rest of this talk is simply just me storytelling, fireside chatting. I'm sharing what I've seen. I'm sure you've seen just as much, if not more. And in fact, after this, one of the great things I like about OWASP, if you're not part of the Slack channels that exist, we're continuing the threat modeling conversation for evolving more references, more templates, more projects so that people can go back and implement any type of threat modeling, whether it be a risk-centric approach or otherwise. But I bring that up simply just for context. The different industries and things that have been seen and witnessed, there's a common denominator, and that's that we're not building security in earlier. Here we are 2017, and it's still post-implementation testing. Chasing people with JIRA tickets, remedy tickets, ServiceNow tickets, whatever ticketing system du jour, it's the same crap. It's like almost like we're collectors, knocking on the door asking for remediation dollars. And it's what really kind of reduces the value that we actually bring. So threat modeling is an aspect that I actually love, because if you look at the different phases of where you want to tackle hardening your business logic, hardening your integrated third-party software, you can look at the design. You can look at the different use cases and see how those use cases might actually beget abuse cases or misuse cases by your own users or by nefarious actors. And so this is the goal and achievement that we want to do. And there's the tools already that OWASP has produced to really facilitate a lot of these phases, regardless of where you are. Typically, when I look at these 7 stages here, people always ask me, well, what stage goes to what, and try to correlate it to a generic SDLC. Stage 1 and 2, I call it discovery phase. It's just trying to figure stuff out. How important is this platform, this solution to the business? Is this a revenue-producing application? Is this one that's regulated? Is this one where the FTC is going to crawl up our rear end if we don't take care of some PII? Or do we have some vendor dependencies? So 2 is, there's a trite saying that you can't really protect what you don't know. And that was a problem going back to the federal example. They didn't know the extent of vulnerable or actually technology stacks they had in their environment. They were amazed to find, still Windows XP, and which is, I guess, not so uncommon back then for federal, but a lot of different platforms that they didn't provide authorization for as part of their CNN and onboarding process. So do you know enough about if you're a part of a development team, do you know the application components at the UI level, the presentation layer? What about the application tier or the backend database tier? Are there cloud components or APIs that you're interfacing with? So enumeration is part of number 2. 3 is really putting it all together, dissecting and understanding the call flows, understanding the protocols. I was really researching a lot lately on threat modeling for these different protocols for IoT, and there's this one protocol that it's amazing how things change and how things evolve. And it's COAP, and it's a protocol that's lightweight that actually rides on top of it's basically HTTP integrated, but you can't secure it with TLS because it's basically sending datagrams versus TCP packets. And what's interesting is that you can use other types of mitigations, like secure UDP mediums. There's a protocol, I think it's DTLS, that can be used as an underlying component. But the point, going back to application decomposition and technology enumeration, is, do you know your stack? Do you know the components within your application? Do you know how they work? Have you taken the time to understand, as a security practitioner, the RFC publications around that spec? That's the great thing about some of the team members that I have, is that I'm getting old, so I'm the has-been, but they're definitely in it, right? They're all about, how does this protocol work? Let me start there. How does this technology work? Because I want to abuse the hell out of it as a breaker or as a black hat. And that is the right mentality. I mean, if for those that are out there, hiring practitioners out there, it is tough to find that psychological trait of a cyber criminal. It's very hard, and it's very much needed. But digressing back into the topic of threat model stories, the threat modeling usage is very much broken. Oftentimes, there'll be individuals that'll say, yeah, I just built this threat model. And, a traditional IT person in software development say, well, this is a DFD. Or a security practitioner should say, well, where are your threats? And which ones do I handle first? It's good to break down your application environments. It's good to basically establish trust zones and trust boundaries, understand what the calls are and what the protocols are, understand the levels of authentication between components, and if there's implicit trust factors that exist from, this is actually a mobile component. We do a lot of mobile testing, and a long time ago, some of our guys found some of the implicit trusts that exist with Android-related applications, and having a field day with that. So being able to threat model and find information and vulnerabilities in design is amazing. So the main crux here that's missing is funneling context into our threat models. And that's why the whole system is broken, in the sense that those that are spewing threat modeling rhetoric need to look at context. What's your threat context? What's your business impact context? You want this context because it makes it topical for interfacing with developers so that they know what to prioritize, or product managers, or project managers. And so these are all the things that you want to be able to understand. So overall, as we look at a threat landscape, meshing with possible impact and systems that might be in scope, you overlay these and you get this kind of this overlap of attack, where if certain parts of your technology footprint do get attacked, and those technology components actually map to, let's say, high impact scenarios of data loss or issuing service level credits as a service provider, or some sort of regulatory nightmare, then you want to be able to correlate the function of your software assets, your libraries, your frameworks, to the actual impact, and then so that you can better foster remediation. But like I said, it's not even about the remediation, it's about planning for a better design. One of the things that I see that's missing oftentimes as a deliverable is an attack tree. So I like attack trees, and some of you might use kill chains, but it's just a visual way so that the people that are developing products, whether it be a consumer electronic device or anything else, actually understand the sequence of, first of all, the motive. The common question is, who would do this? And you're exemplifying it. And you're demonstrating it with evidence. So it's evidence-based threat modeling. And then you're actually mapping it with attack patterns. You can use KPEC as a great resource. And you're basically mapping those attack patterns to nodes on your tree that are the vulnerabilities or weaknesses in the application. And you map those weaknesses to the application components in your architectural layer. And so it's all about messaging. That's what I started out talking about, is messaging. We have a messaging problem. And sometimes these sort of illustrations can help to improve the message. I'm going to skip this slide and talk about roles for a second. Oftentimes, and I cut this slide off deliberately because I wanted everyone to kind of look at the font because it's kind of small. So real story, enterprise, large multinational company trying to really have a toll gate for threat modeling, but doing it differently and doing it the right way. They're not doing it, they're doing it early. And they're trying to basically have secure design reviews early during the conceptual design phases of a given product that's being developed. And they want to be able to have certain people involved. And if you've ever, like a very large company has very centralized corporate functions, and then they have business units. And so this provides kind of a RACI model for who does what across various stages of threat modeling that's risk-centric. But it's important to basically leverage the collaborative aspect of threat modeling to understand what the ultimate risk reduction goal is. A project manager or product manager is going to have a tough time defending the 2 to 3 to 4 hour increment in their overall development lifecycle if you're providing a value that's going to save them remediation time that's going to be 10 times that post-implementation. That's one. Number two is the preemptive value that they might be saving in terms of egg on their face if the product basically was flawed and got a bad rap sheet. Because there's really difficult to quantify bad PR that would be sustained by that. So preemptively handling that and translating a security requirement into almost a functional requirement that gets understood by the development audience is an easy win. Developers don't want to work on N-2 version of their code base. They want to work on the latest and greatest and the hottest thing. So having to go back to fix old stuff is just really lame. So there's people involved that can make different activities accountable. And going into the tail aspect of how do we integrate what we do and who we are as a global organization into improved security by design, improved threat modeling, improved risk understanding. Hopefully, one of the two things that I've talked about already is the lack of impact context in that risk formula, the lack of threat information. Like, not the bullshit of like subscribe to this threat feed and get inundated with like, gigabytes and terabytes of just meaningless threat data, but something that you can actually operationalize within you and your teams. And there's tons of ways of doing that. But so ultimately, as an organization within OWASP, we want to be able to leverage the different projects and tools in order so that if we look at a DFD like this, and we look at the orange boxes, and we look at the attack vectors that are coming into the different architectural layers, the natural question is, what can we do earlier to secure a more resilient application that fosters better authentication, better authorization models, better crypto, implementation of crypto, et cetera. And let's dovetail into the OWASP projects that exist. And there's tons. I could really spend 30 minutes on each one. The Juice Shop, Bjorn in Germany, he did an awesome job. He's a really passionate guy. I loved working with him when I was in Europe for AppSecUSA and then in the London summit. And this is kind of like the latest CTF, B2C, e-commerce deliberately flawed site where you can learn and you can understand how to hack a flawed application. But what I wanted to do is I got with him and I said, let me build a pasta simulation. And I did, but it's only 90% complete because I slacked. So I'm going to finish that actually next week. And fortunately, the great thing about OWASP is that there's global people that can make you accountable and shame you on Slack in order to kind of get you to finish what you promised. So that's great. So I encourage everyone once it's out to see if this is something that you could use, see if this is something that you could build, see if this is something that you could actually reboot because you've actually incorporated something else into the process. One of the things in the book is this risk-based threat modeling and this kind of blind threat modeling idea. And I have this stepping scale because I was thinking about this when I was writing the book a couple years ago, and I was thinking, if people, and a lot of people don't understand threat models, if people just were to do some preemptive hardening on two main ingredients, the technology that they're using that's supporting the use cases for their application, and if they were to correlate the countermeasures that might exist with the cheat sheets alone would provide some good preemptive mitigation. So I call that blind threat modeling. You're really kind of trying to not understand the threat context or even impact of what could happen. You're preemptively saying, these are the components that we have. And based upon these guidance and this references, these are the bad things that could happen. And this is where something like an OWASP top 10 may be of use. But the only reason I was given OWASP top 10 or any other, and I'm not the only one. I mean, this goes to the SANS, CAG or any other list, is they don't know your organization. I run a consulting company. One of the first things I tell all my consultants is like, first thing you do is shut the hell up and listen. Listen. Do you understand what these people are selling? How are they making money? If you don't get in their shoes, let's just give it to somebody else. We have to, and this is really kind of a good tip for everyone, because once we understand what's at stake, we can convey the value of what we're trying to mitigate. I didn't mean that to rhyme, sorry. So this is the ecology of OWASP. You have awareness projects, training projects, and let's talk about how this could all fit into better understanding risk, applying it to a threat model, in this case a risk-centric one. You have the CISO project. The co-author for PASTA is Marco Morana. He's been based in London for a long time. Now he's moved back to Florida just in time for Irma, and he's doing good. Just saw him the other day, and he is leading the CISO project along with a team of 6 other people, global individuals. And if you've peeked into that project, the quality of content and literature and expertise is phenomenal, right? And there's actually a section in there which I've strategically done a snippet of, is around metrics for managing risk in application security investments. Because being able to derive what is my impact, or how do I calculate, an impact scenario for clients or business units or information owners, whatever, is really important. So you can factor this into as almost a procedural way to apply stage 1 of POSTA as an example. I wanted to talk about a real-life case example. Commercial insurance company got hit. This is a long time ago when I first started Versprite, and this particular commercial insurance company got hit by Conficker, and they walked out this very big, prominent consulting firm, the VP and the senior director. They just kicked them out, and because all they were touting was like patch management. You guys suck at patch management. You didn't patch, and that's why you got Conficker. But they kicked them out. And it goes back to the messaging. So what happened is that we came in, we listened, we obviously got what happened in terms of the timeline of events for how they actually got infected. But we also met with what were these infected assets doing for the operation? How does this company make money? I just said that like 10 minutes ago. And then we correlated, the systems were down. So we unitized, what we did is we came up with a dollar unit value, which came up to be something ridiculous, like $650,000 an hour of opportunity cost, lost revenue. And when we showed the numbers, we did the math with the controller, we showed it to them as like, hey, this is what we see as your cost. You kicked out colleagues of ours in the industry for this, but this is, if you don't improve your game in something that's really simple, right? Patch management. This is what you're looking at, and this is what you're eating up right now. And the controller signed off on it, went to the CFO signed off on it, and they launched a patch management program, and the point is messaging. Being able to, and this goes back to this slide, do you understand how to quantify impacts that you're actually addressing in your application threat model? Security coding guidelines, you can mess something like this with that blind threat model I talked about, where you preemptively build security in. You could use the cheat sheets here. ASVS, phenomenal project. The testing guide. So now we're going, further up the POSTA stack. Stage 4 is threat analysis. Stage 5 is vulnerability or weakness identification. There's a lot of great tools to do that, right? ZAP is a phenomenal tool. You could use multiple different testing criteria, like the testing guide. You could use, in terms of tools, you can definitely use ZAP in order to basically unit test some of the URIs, URLs for different types of vulnerabilities or weaknesses. And you want to correlate those things like SQL injection. Okay, information loss. What information do I have that is vulnerable from this component in my application? Do I care? Is it, understand what information is at stake so that you can not go into somebody that owns the application and say, you got SQL injection. I owned you 7 ways Sunday. You want to talk about the impact and say, you're 500,000 records, all regulated. Auditors up in here in a month. Audit fees of, $500,000 based upon last year's, or last time we got hit with something like that. Talk about that. Don't lead off conversations with business owners, application owners with SQL injection, numeric SQL injection, whatever. The OWASP W2F web testing framework, which is actually built around really good testing methodologies, like one of my favorites, the pen testing standard, P-test, is a great tool to basically exercise layer 6, which is attack modeling. Going back to thinking nefariously and thinking like a criminal, I think that's something that's always going to be a challenge. But being able to not just be a tool monkey, but to think like a criminal and say, how do I subvert this process? How do I basically do a persistent level attack and compromise the system? Or how do I do a privilege escalation? Because if I do a privilege escalation, that can get me to my threat motive. Thinking like that versus like, let me get my app scan, let me drag and drop my library of OWASP top 10 payloads, and let me press the green button. That's what's happening. We're still doing this. We're still doing this, and it's sad. So hopefully, we can all have a metaphorical, I guess, awakening or spiritual awakening or security lobotomy to start anew, to begin to kind of like repackage how we are going to actually reduce risk, parlay risk, and leverage some of the tools that a lot of these people have volunteered their time and effort for. Mod Security Rule Set is a great project. You know, it's been used by multiple different vendors, and it's highly effective. And you know, this week I really wanted to go to that workshop, but it was a WAF benchmarking testing workshop or talk. I think it happened yesterday at 3:30, and I wanted to go to that one. And because you can take, you know, the Mod Security Core rule set, you can take this methodology for testing WAFs and add that as part of your stage 6 attack enumeration attack modeling for a threat model. That attack phase is also relevant in other types of methodologies. So you want to be able to operationalize these attacks and not just have them to be that they're theoretical. Because that's where you get into the probabilistic analysis. Were you successful, were you not? And that's how you can basically substantiate your threat claims in your risk-based threat model. So this is the second to the last slide. And ultimately, another great project is OpenSAM. You know, Gary McGraw was talking heavily about BSIM and the keynote I saw earlier this week as I was revisiting keynotes from OWASP, keynotes of past. And you know, if you're threat modeling, the important thing is like anything in life, is to take it a step at a time. You know, what are your initial milestones? You know, do you simply want to understand your technology footprint? Do you maybe just want to get people to not throw their door in your face when you talk to developers or architects as you come, you know, talking about threat modeling, kumbaya? So that might be a goal, but it never fails that when you get together with other people that are supporting, managing, deploying into the environment that's at stake, that's supporting the business, that if everyone is now operationalizing security and talking about threat analysis and talking about preemptive hardening and mitigation and countermeasures, then it's less adversarial. Appreciate everyone's time. If there's any questions, I'm more than happy to take it. But it's been great to be here in Orlando. Thanks to all the volunteers. Thanks to all the vendors, too, who make this possible. And thanks to all of you guys for being here and supporting OWASP.
Okay, hello. It's kind of the guy who has to switch off the light. I switched on the light after the last call, so they gave me the honor. I hope you enjoyed the conference. I hope you enjoyed last night. It was really a blast to be here. For me, it's really weird. I'm from, as you hear, the slight European accent. To be at Disney World and see what you do. It was impressive firework, good food, good drinks. I hope you enjoyed it. Yeah, you're all tired, you don't want to play, yay! So this event was, unfortunately, is about to close down. We had a total of close to 800 registrations. We had 18 students or faculty members. We had 10 trainings in the first 2 days, Tuesday and Wednesday. We had 58 talks. I hope they were really good. I thank you to the speakers. Great job having them here. Hey, speakers. All this is possible, and you know, everybody who's engaged in OWASP by volunteers who do the call for paper review, the call for training review. We had, I think, close to 400 submissions for papers. They all have been reviewed by at least 3. They make the selection. You can imagine how much private time is going in there. So, and also the volunteers who are running here from the registration, at the room proctors, at the room runners, everything. So a big applause for the volunteers. And as you know, I think for such an organization as we are a very small staff. and they make it all possible, our backbone, our operation center. So also a big applause to the staff who make this possible. I don't know how many of you go to other conferences of this size. We keep the price reasonably or as low as possible, and this only is possible with all the sponsors. With 41 sponsors, it's really great. The most I ever had, I think. Thank you for the sponsors. Now, normally it's now the time to announce next year's AppSecUSA. Unfortunately, we have not all details settled yet, but hey, there's also other countries outside of the US where people like me come from. So the next Global AppSec conference will be in Israel, in Tel Aviv, in June 2018. Oh yeah, that will come up. So we are just about, it's actually my fault because I was too busy here. The call for training and call for papers for that conference will open soon. Hopefully when I'm in the flight and can work on it. So it will open really soon. And when you ever needed a reason to go to Tel Aviv, that might be it. Submit your training, submit your talk, and who knows, you might be chosen. Actually, that's it. That's the light is switched on. Oh.
One last thing. Tom and Michael Coates, Josh Sokol, and Tobias Gondrum. This is the last go on the board for a little while, and so I wish to thank them for their service to OWASP over a long period of time.
So one more thing back on the numbers. I think it's always important to have people understand what it takes to run a conference and what OWASP looks at this as a fundraiser. But keep in mind that revenue from this particular event was about $660,000. We had expenses of approximately $520,000, so it's one hell of a party, isn't it? But certainly I think no one would disagree that the space would certainly allow for us to have a double conference of this size, if nothing else. And certainly being able to raise visibility for software security and get more of our peers involved in the community is what we try to do at every AppSec. So, as we had issues with hurricanes and issues and things as leading up to this event, please make sure that for AppSec EU, as well as your local chapters, as well as other conferences, that you get the word out, because having peers come here and hear the information is exactly what the mission is. So with that, thanks, guys.
Sorry, I forgot. No, US, all about the money. It runs the world, I know. Yeah, and I have to be more verbal and longer sentences to speak English, I'm sorry. Okay, but actually, last but not least, I want to thank you all for being here. You make this a big success. Getting together, all your peers, all your interests, listen to the speakers, listen to us. Thank you.